we're gonna let him take center stage. We don't all, not everybody has to look at us. So let's dive into this, guys, and just kind of, John, share your thoughts, and Ryan and I will continue to share ours as well when you watch them. But first thing, two things for me, guys, that I notice is, like you said, number one, not a big bazooka arm, but he throws one of the best deep balls in this class, in my opinion.
And he does it without utilizing his whole body. He's not the biggest guy in the world, 6'2", I don't know, 185, 190 or whatever it is. A lot of these guys at the Elite 11 in particular really have to utilize their core, their lower half, and you almost see it when they get rid of the football. I think with Austin, it is relatively natural. The motion is quick enough. It actually looks a little quicker than we're seeing here on tape. I think he's tightened up.
He's sped it up.
Yeah, just a little bit as you would expect from that natural progression. And I think kind of the underrated element is the mobility. I think he can work the RPO game, keep a defense honest to a degree. And he didn't have to do it a whole lot on Friday nights, but in some of these drills and situations where you're designed to be uncomfortable, you see him on the move here a little bit. He looked very comfortable outside on the pocket, even rolling left. Some of the more difficult situations they tried to put him in, there were times where he looked better than CJ Stroud and Bryce Young in some of these drills. So I think there's a lot of kind of unknown with Austin that really works. But on the surface level, quick trigger, quick processor, accurate, protects the football, and he's productive. I mean, that's kind of the foundation, right? We get away from that a little bit, but when we're talking quarterbacks, production needs to be talked about almost as much as possible in my mind.
I think there's a couple things for me. Number one, about the throwing motion. I think what I saw on film from him as a junior, his throwing motion, his body, it was almost like a dead ringer for how Jack Cohn throws football at Notre Dame this past year. Now, when you watch his summer film, his motion has changed. He doesn't look like Jack anymore. And when I watch it, John, I think, number one, I think he does use his core a little bit better in the 7-on-7 events. And this is true for a lot of kids. It's easier to kind of really get into the, plant your feet and drive when there's no pass rush and there's not a game being played. The other thing, too, is the ball's jumping out of his hand a lot more with a lot more explosiveness this summer than in the fall, which, again, when you look at the release was a little bit longer in the fall. When you have to muscle up a little bit to get more zip on the ball, it's gonna lengthen your throwing motion. So as his arm, I think, has gotten stronger, as he's physically matured, I think that's another thing that allowed him to speed up his release, is he doesn't have to put as much emphasis on it with his upper body. And I think those two things are partly why his release has been sped up. But then the other thing is this throw right here. His feel for ball placement is really good. Like, this ball has to be on the back hip. If he leads this guy, it's getting picked off or it's getting batted down. This has to be a back shoulder throw. And his touch on the deep balls too, John, he is about as good as I've seen as putting that sucker on that outside shoulder. His timing, I mean, he's throwing the ball here. This kid's not even into his break yet. Watch this corner.
And he's not even stepping into it. That's what I like.
Right.
I'm like, that's a quick trigger. I'm like, get the ball there regardless of the mechanics at some point, which you have to do, of course.
Right. This is another example. I mean, just his ball placement as a passer is really impressive, to where if he does continue to see a jump in arm strength, that's going to make it more effective, because now he's going to be able to get even more of those balls over the top. The other thing too, John, for a guy that doesn't have like a bazooka for an arm, he's a pretty gritty thrower. There's some game film out there where he's taking chances. I mean, he's going to throw the ball into tight coverage. He's going to put that sucker over the middle, and there's a lot of talent. Like I said, there's a lot of arm talent here, even if he doesn't have necessarily the Jaden Rashada, Nico, Eli Holstein, just arm power. He's got a lot of arm talent, in my opinion.
Yeah, and he's confident. I think that's, we talk about ball distributors, point guards on the field, all that, and it's kind of a negative connotation, like, oh, he's efficient, blah, blah, blah. He's confident. And like you said, he takes those chances. That was one of my first notes before the Elite 11. I was kind of doing like a preview, and I was like, man, he really trusts his arm, and he'll throw a guy open at the high school level, just things that you don't really see as much. And I think that has to do with his roster. It's not, Dripping Springs is not Austin Westlake or South.
He's not throwing to Braylon James and Jaden Greathouse in high school.
Yeah, which is a good thing.
Right. This is another one that I like. This is just, he does a lot of this stuff, Ryan. Ryan, what are some things that kind of, as you watch through this film and as you've watched through Austin, I know you started watching him before. Ryan and I started watching this kid's film a couple weeks ago when he was kind of put on our radar. What are some things that you're seeing and that pop out to you, Ryan, when you watch this kid on film?
Yeah, I mean, I like John's point about, he's a little bit of a flat-footed thrower right now, right? And there's a natural progression that's going to happen from a strength perspective because, I mean, again, like John said, he's 185, 190 soaking wet right now. There's a natural strength aspect that's going to improve as he just keeps filling out his body. But I think what you see, and reason I think that his arm strength is going to take a huge jump is when he's working quick game or he's working some RPO concepts that kind of force his weight forward and to distribute forward. I think that you see the ball come out with a lot of juice. And I think that he just gets a little comfortable in that back foot when he's working a little bit of a deeper drop or out of the gun without play action. But even on that last one, you saw like when he's able to kind of step into it off of the play action move, like that ball is coming out of his hand quickly and it's got a lot of velocity behind it. So he has the baseline. He obviously has great ball placement to him, and I think that his arm strength is going to take a huge jump. I kind of put into the piece this week on the mailbag, Brian. He reminds me as a thrower, and again, I'm not predicting this kid's going to be the first pick in the draft, but he reminds me of Jared Goff a little bit as far as a thrower, and I think Jared Goff kind of gets that same designation as a, he's not a strong-armed passer. He's just kind of a guy that's a solid distributor and doesn't take a lot of bad chances. But I think that there's a big misnomer there because if you watch Jared Goff has a live arm. The ball comes out of his hand well, and that's what I see with this kid. He might not be the fleetest of foot. He might not be Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen arm strength, but I think when he kind of gets his mechanics together and he continues to fill out, that ball is just going to continue to jump off his hand even quicker than it already does.
I'll take college version of Jared Goff.
Right? 100%. 100%.
Sign me up, brother. I'll take that in a heartbeat. No question. I think the thing I like too, guys, about him, and we've talked about ball placement and accuracy, and John, I think Ryan, I think you pointed out he's not a great athlete, but John, I think you also pointed out but he uses his feet in the pocket really effectively, and if you do leave a crease, he will step up and run into it, which you don't have to be a great athlete. Tom Brady has shown this. You don't have to be a great athlete to be really good in the pocket. Peyton Manning I'm not comparing the kid to Peyton Manning and Tom Brady, you get my point, but you don't have to be a great athlete to have great pocket mobility. And I think he has a really good feel for the game. And that's what we talked about before you joined, John, is Notre Dame. And I think a lot of schools are putting a premium on high IQ football players. And you're watching this kid as a junior in high school banging corner routes before guys are not only out of their break, before they're into their break. And he's just putting it out there with touch. You saw the one later in the film where he literally, because there's a rush, he kind of drops that ball out towards the sideline, and the kid runs underneath it with a safety, a linebacker, and a corner, like all kind of triangling that route. That's the kind of stuff you look for on film. Does this kid show the anticipation? Does this kid is he able to get the ball out in space and let his receivers go make plays? If he's showing that kind of confidence in his receivers at Dripping Springs, what's he going to be like if he gets a Braylon James, a Ronan Hannafin, a Jaden Greathouse, a Rico Flores, a Tobias Merriweather, who I think right now, I think SI All-American is the only outlet that had Tobias Merriweather properly ranked last year. But he's going to have guys, Eli Raridan, Holden Stace. I mean, he's going to have those. What kind of confidence is he going to have when he's got those kind of cats? And I think that's when he also started to jump as he plays on that 7-7 team, I believe, with Braylon James and Jaden Greathouse and guys like that. And that's from, talking to some people, that's kind of when his game started to really get noticed. Because you talked about this, John. Even at the Elite 11 in Dallas, he wasn't a kid that had all these high school or these colleges coming after him. It wasn't until he got deeper into the summer that people were like, oh, this cat can play. This cat's pretty good. And that's when you saw his recruitment blow up, even with other uncommitted guys.
Yeah, that's a great point because we were there in Dallas, and look, that's a loaded camp every year, right? And Jackson Arnold's throwing off his back foot, looking amazing. And then some of these other guys, J.J. Cole was there, Flores was there, the Okie State commit. And then you just kind of were like, who's this blonde dude? Like, he just keeps ripping it. And you're like, oh, that's the Baylor commit. And then, like, by hour 3, you're like, okay, yeah, the Baylor commit is going to lead this thing. And then we'll go from there with the rest of the evaluation. And I think, yeah, he just kind of sneaks up on you. And I think you mentioned a great point, Brian. When you start to think about his projection at the next level, regardless of where he ends up, but particularly Notre Dame and the style of receiver they're bringing in, there's some size variance, but there's a lot of bigger guys, right? Bigger, longer, ball skill kind of guys. When you throw with confidence and anticipation, what does that open up? 50-50 balls, back shoulder balls. Some of those, just you and me locked in as a quarterback and receiver. No one else is even on our same page, but we're going to work this defensive back based on his leverage, down and distance, the sidelines, etc.
Right.
And so I think he can kind of exhibit some of those things. And then the second thing is, back at the Elite 11 finals, the second day is my favorite day. It's the pro day script. Every single quarterback, whether he's a college kid or a high school kid, works the same 20 throws. And Novosad had like the hottest run within those 20 throws. I think he hit, we chart 1, 2, 3. 3 is the perfect throw. 2 is on target, but not perfect. 1 is just a miss. He had the streak of the most 3s in a row. I think he did 7 in a row. So there's a bit of jump shooter rhythm to this kid's game, which when you start to pair with the confidence and the efficiency, it kind of works really, really nicely together. And he becomes kind of this modern quarterback projection, even though he's not the most fleet of foot, like we talked about. So there's a confidence with him that's kind of quiet, which is good, and certainly fits Notre Dame to a T. But I think that's why like he's just still hot on the trail. People are just digging into it more and like, oh man, we missed on this kid. We need to jump in as soon as possible. And again, he's said no thanks to a few in between some of these. Oh, that's great. Let me post this offer on Twitter. He's had a couple big time no thanks, which tells me a lot about him off the field as well.